We're joined in studio by Joe Oliver. He served as finance minister under Stephen Harper from March 2014 until his election defeat last month. Mr. Oliver, nice to see you. I just wanted to start by getting your reaction to what the new finance minister had to say about the fiscal situation, projecting a $3 billion deficit.
Well, I was a little bit surprised because both the PBO and our own forecast was for a fairly adequate surplus, not a large one, something in the order of $1.6 billion after the first 6 months. And he is forecasting a $3 billion deficit. So the issue is what happened to create a $4.6 billion difference. And if you look at it, if you analyze it as economists have done, including Stephen Gordon, who wrote in Maclean's, he's an economics professor at Laval, he said, well, the bulk of it actually wasn't a decline in revenue for this year, it was an increase in expenditures, and it's not entirely clear just what that fully relates to.
All right, but they've only been in government for, a couple of weeks, so they can't be spending all that money already. This must be money, this must be a deficit that they inherited from your government.
Well, that, of course, is the classic scenario. When a new government comes in, I'm shocked, the cupboard is bare, these guys are more incompetent and more profligate than I could have imagined. But the fact is we left them with a $1.6 billion surplus. I mean, external factors are of course critical. The price of oil has fallen, global growth is slower, and I was always asked, what is it that you're most concerned about? It was always the externalities. But when we're talking about the full year, we're talking about what they are going to do in the next 6 months. And if expenditures are going up, it's important to understand why and for what.
Okay, I just want to play a clip, and this is Stephen Harper. So this is Stephen Harper on October 17th talking about the budget situation. This is 2 days before the election on October 19th. So this is Stephen Harper.
Friends, at the federal level, this is our record. We now have a budget surplus this year running at the rate of $5.2 billion. We are on our way to a second consecutive balanced budget in a row.
So this is what I don't understand, Mr. Oliver, is I don't understand how things can change so quickly. Even the PBO, just a couple weeks after that election, predicted a deficit. So you were still 2 days before the election predicting that there would be a surplus.
The PBO wasn't predicting a deficit. They were predicting a surplus. What the Prime Minister said was there was $5.2 billion, which was accurate for the first 3 months of the year. At the end of 6 months, the surplus had declined, but it was down to $1.6 billion. So that is a fact, that there is a surplus of $1.6 billion for the first 6 months. So the Prime Minister then said, we're on the road for a surplus. He didn't say it was going to be, he was going to extrapolate the $5.2 billion and multiply it by 4. And I was very clear that was not what we were talking about, a modest surplus of, I can't recall the exact number, 1.4 billion or so. And we felt that was achievable. And
but was it too rosy? Was it too rosy? Were you predicting? Well, this is the thing that I think it frustrates people sometimes, is though there seem to be partisan reasons that get in the way of this.
Look, I want to make this is a very important point. We did not do our own forecasts. We took the average of the forecast of 15 private sector economists. The forecast was entirely depoliticized. We, in fact, had nothing to do with it, other than make the calculation of what's the average of 15 private sector economists. External events have probably reduced their forecast. I don't know whether the new Minister of Finance, Bill Morneau, used that average. He didn't allude to it, or whether he got his advice from the Department of Finance. I'm not questioning the revenue side, which wasn't really much of the reason for the difference. We're talking about $4.6 billion. The bulk of it, as I understand it, came from increased expenditures, which, of course, aren't retroactive. They have to be for the next 6 months.
But you are convinced that you on October 19th that there was at least $1 billion in budget surplus that you left this Liberal government in the space of a couple of weeks that turned into a $3 billion deficit.
I'm not. Well, it's it's not a question of conviction, it's a question of fact. There's 1.6 billion in the first 6 months. That's those are the numbers. That's fact. What we're discussing is what happens in the next 6 months, the next half of the year, and in that half of the year, somehow the 1.6 billion disappears, and we're now into a $3 billion deficit. And it's not primarily due to a decline in revenue. It's primarily due to an increase in expenditures, and therefore it's important to understand what those expenditures that the new government, which is in control for the second half of the year, intends to incur for what and why. That's a legitimate question for Canadians to ask and have answered in a government which talks a lot about transparency. I don't question that. I just like to see it.
They say that they've inherited the situation, though. He used that word. Bill Morneau used it over and over again. That they inherited these that they inherited this deficit.
They inherited a $1.6 billion surplus. Now, they also inherited a global environment that we all have to deal with, which we can't control. They've inherited a lower price for oil and a slower growth in the global economy. And of course, that's one of those externalities that we don't have control over. And that's why we ask our private sector economists to tell us what they think. But you know, at the end of the day, every government is handed a set of cards, and it's how they deal with it. If the situation's difficult, it's your objective to mitigate the damage and make the situation better rather than make it worse. And that's what we elect governments to do, and that's what I hope, because I put country before party, I hope that Bill Morneau handles it well for the benefit of Canadians.
Mr. Oliver, good of you to take the time. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
And that is former Finance Minister Joe Oliver here in our Toronto studio.